Nurul. He's the APNIC training manager, and he will be talking to you about APNIC training, and in particular the new technical assistant program that we introduced this year. And we're followed by Jeff Houston, and I probably don't need to do much introduction about him, for his very well-known IPv6 measurement activity in this region and globally. So he will be talking to you about the status of APNIC IPv4 resources, exhaustion, and transfer. And after Jeff's talk, we will have Vivek Ningam, who is the Member Services Manager, and he will be sharing with you about trends and observation we noted for recent membership application. After Vivek's talk, we have Tom Harrison, our software manager, and he will be sharing information about WHOIS, which is a historical WHOIS service. So we're looking forward to all these talks, and I will be the last speaker just to briefly talk to you about how to provide feedback to APNIC services. So with that, I would like to introduce the first speaker, Nurul, to come up and give his talk, please. You could either use this or whichever you use. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. After the lunch, it's really a difficult session to start the presentation, I think. But anyway, as George said, we will try to make it as very informal, so that you feel like whatever the question that you have, you can ask us, so that we can incorporate all the questions and comments, and then start preparing our service for our members. In my presentation, what I'll be discussing today is the training and technical assistance services that APNIC provide for the community. My name is Nurul Islam Roman. I manage APNIC training and technical assistance service. In my presentation, I'll be talking about the training services, how we try to revamp our training program, and what is our focus or the objective of our training, what sort of training that we deliver. And then I'll discuss about some resources that we use in our training delivery. And then I move on to our technical assistance programs. And in that program, what are the technical assistance services that we can offer to our member. So APNIC training, if we see how we try to build the profile of the APNIC training service, and how does it look like? We are focusing mostly to provide internet operational technology training for our member. This is an open standard, technology neutral, RFC compliant training. It talks about mostly the industry best practice and how to run a network. And we found a very big demand in the industry on the internet operational technology training, and that's where we are trying to focus in our training delivery. Who provide our training? The trainers who provide the training are mostly the industry experts. APNIC has got a very small in-house training team. They focus on developing training content, resources, and when we deliver the training, we try to include the industry experts around the region to deliver our training, so that the first-hand people who has got the first-hand expertise, first-hand knowledge, they can transfer the knowledge to the community and how to run the internet. The in-house training team, what they do, they prepare a well-structured training program. They focus on the content delivery and content preparation, lab resource, and other training logistic-related tasks. And one of the very unique features that we have in our training delivery, we use multi-vendor technology in our training. So that includes a number of vendors who produce equipments to run the internet globally. And we include all the vendor product in our training delivery to make it vendor neutral so that all our members across every vendor product, they can get training for APNIC. That's what our training profile. Now I'll discuss about the core competence area where APNIC training team is focusing to develop our competencies. We work on our very important training area, which is the Internet Resource Management, Internet Routing Registry, and RPKI, which are the core business of APNIC training and APNIC as an organization. We focus improving the training resources and material on this topic. And then on the technology area, we focus on routing and switching, which is the basic fundamental building block of our member network infrastructure. And we focus on IPv6 deployment and transition technologies. In services, we focus on DNSSEC deployment, and our focus on how our members can deploy DNSSECs into our network, including the reverse or ARPA zone for those block APNIC distribute to our members. We focus on Linux system and Linux and Unix sysadmin training. That includes web service, mail service, DNS service, and other services runs on dual stack. And obviously, the network security and incident handling. That is one of the very important area that our members are focusing since last few years. So we are trying to revamp the whole training program on network security and incident handling. And then the new technologies, for example, SDN, NFV, and virtualizations. So we are building our core competency area on this topic as well. So those are our core competent area. On this area, we build our Internet Operational Technology Training Program. So when we do those training for our members, what are the training resources that we use? How we deliver the operational training knowledge to our member? For that, one of the very important tools is our training lab. So we build a very scalable, real ISP training lab in our office. That's what a cross-site picture of our training lab. So we have a prototype ISP networks has been built in APNIC office that is connected to internet and running on AS17821. So that's a live network. So we build our training materials, training resources. We do all our case study analysis on this training lab. And some portion of the training labs is co-located in the data center in Australia. And some portion are hosted in our in-house office. So when we do the training, for example, this time in Colombo, we connected back to our Brisbane office training lab, and we did all the experiments from here. So little bit more information about training lab. This training lab is a similar infrastructure that we try to build here, what our members, they normally get into their office. So the purpose, the objective of this training lab is when they come for the training in our workshop, they'll get a similar operational network looks and feelings. And what configurations they do on the lab in the workshop, they can see the impact globally, how it works in an interconnected network environment. So the lab is not a very isolated one. It's connected to the internet. When they do their experiment, they can see the impact live in the internet. We have some check and balance as well. Some filters are there so that if members, when they're doing the training, if they break the network, that don't break the internet. So that security things are in place. In the lab, as a topology, we have all the component of a member network. It has got the component of IP core, which is this side, and then you have got access network. From there, the access network, they are multi-home with the upstream, and at the back end, they're connected to the exchange, and those are the upstream networks. So it has got every component of a live ISP network. And we build the hands-on exercises covering all area of an infrastructure. As I said, who provide the training for us? We collaborate with the community. We invite industry experts to do our training, who are the country champion engineers, who demonstrated a significant mentorship role within the country and region, and has got huge operational experience and would like to share with the community. We invite them in our training, and then the training delivered in APNIC training is a community-based training. So it's not APNIC in-house trainers who only deliver the training. If anyone within the community is interested to share their knowledge, please feel free to talk to us. We will be delighted to invite you in our next or future training. I would like to share some statistics about our training in last 2 quarters. From April 30 till June 2016, we have delivered around 15 face-to-face courses and 34 e-learning. And we cover like 11 cities of 11 economics. And we train around 576 engineers. And we have a YouTube channel. And YouTube channels, this is the views. And then from June till September quarter, there are the statistics that we had. Now I'd like to talk about the technical assistance service. Technical assistance service is a further extension of our training delivery. After we finish the training, we saw members, they feel very comfortable when they build a trust with the trainer. They feel very comfortable to come and sit with the trainer and would like to discuss about their issues, their network problems. So that's why we actually extended our training program into the technical assistance service. So in technical assistance service, we would like to focus on the widespread operational issues that has been experienced by our members across the region when they operate the network. We try to limit the scope of those technical assistance. If some widespread issues, if member it's difficult for them to justify as a commercial big project to solve the problem, but if you consider it as an overall issues for the whole internet ecosystem, it's a big issue. So our task team, technical assistance service teams, will be focusing on those specific problem that has got a widespread issues in internet operation, but as an individual problem for individual members, it's really difficult to justify a business case. So in 2017 and 2016, this year, we will be focusing on some areas of technical assistance. For example, one of the very important one is routing registry service automation. So we have seen a number of issues, number of incidents across the region about route hijacking by mistake, and that create a significant instability into the global internet. So task team will sit with our members. They will explain the technology solution available. For example, RPKI is the new one, and we have got IRR, Internet Routing Registry. So we'll sit out with our members, we'll discuss about their routing policy, try to build their RPSL syntax according to their topology, their requirement, and give them some tools, programs, so that they can use those and automate their routing infrastructure and the routing registry service. The second technical assistance service that we will be focusing this year is IPv6 deployment planning. So our members, after getting IP address or IPv6 address, they need some sort of assistance to make a design address and design plan. When the proper address and design plan is ready, then they go and deploy that IPv6 into their network. So in different stages of IPv6 deployment, task team will sit with them and do the things together. And that's how we will give them some momentum so that they can do those things by themselves. Prefix aggregation analysis and action plans, especially the BCP38. So I think some of you are familiar with the CIDR report. From the CIDR report, when you see mostly deaggregated ISPs in this region, or if you have some difficulties in aggregating your prefixes, sending it to the global internet, and optimize the routing table size globally, feel free to talk to the task team or APNIC team so that we can sit with you. We can go through your prefix advertisement plan and you can recommend something so that you can optimize your prefix advertisement and reduce the global and help reducing the global routing table size. Also, will help you to deploy BCP38 to secure your network as well. And the fourth one we will be focusing on technical assistance is IXP operation and system support. After building the ISP to scale the ISP in a bigger environment to deal with the big amount of traffic and automate the management of the IX, we support our member to deploy open source Internet Exchange Points management tools, RPKI network management tools, and other things in an IX. So routing registry I have already explained. So routing registry is all about automating the legitimacy of address check. And as I explained, two technology will be working on routing registry function automation. One is RPKI. So in RPKI, there are two parts of it. You need to create the ROA, and you need to configure your router. So based on our last 2-year promotion, we managed to get some ROA as created by the members. But the next step is you need to implement those into your routers. So the technical assistance teams will sit with our member, help them to configure their router and implement the RPKI. That's one side of the routing security. Other side is your routing registry system, or IRR. We help our member to sit with them, analyze their peering policy, analyze their transit policy, and build the equivalent RPSL syntax for them. And then that syntax member can upload it to the routing registry systems, and they can automate the whole process to secure their route advertisement. In V6 deployment plan, initially we start with the addressing plan. After receiving the prefix from APNIC, how you plan for your network. We will sit with our member, we will help them to design that address plan. And then afterward, we'll help them to build template for their routers based on the address plan. And then you can implement those things into your routers. Some statistics about tasks, what we did last 2 quarters. We have done a number of technical assistance sessions in Thailand, Cambodia, as you can see on the slide. So in technical assistance, there are 3 ways we deliver it. Number 1 is our direct technical assistance. We go to the economy or country and sit with our members. Some of the TA that we do based on, depending on the conference, and we do some demo in front of a group of people. And the third way, we do technical assistance with a member by sending email and sometimes on Skype. We help them. So if you see the statistics in last 2 quarters, these are the TA that we did across the region. I think that's the end of my presentation. And if you have any question, we can take the question now or probably afterward. Feel free, because we are around next, even tomorrow. Thank you very much. I hope the presentation will be useful. Any question?
Do we have question for Nurul? No? Okay. Thank you, Nurul.
Thank you.
All right, next I would like to invite Jeff to come up to the stage to give his talk. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, George. I'm Jeff Houston. I'm with APNIC. And George has been kind enough to actually slot me so that I'm not trying to do a 20-minute talk in 3 minutes flat, for which I appreciate a lot. It's the first time this week. So I'll spend a little bit of time actually going through this. The reason why I'm going through this is that part of my role is to try and inform you when you think about APNIC's address policies and management policies. It's that feedback loop that says, well, what's actually happening? How are addresses being used? What does it look like? So I've been careful to assemble this material as if I was you. from the published data. I'm not using insider information. I'm not going behind the curtain. All of the data here is data that's accessible to you as well. And the inferences I draw from it, I'm drawing from the published data, the public record. So let's have a look at this, and I've sort of divided this up into 4 areas. The first is a broader global look at the state of V4 and exhaustion. And then I'll look at the last /8, the returned pools and transfers, and look a little bit about what's going on, okay? So I think we've all seen variations of this figure, that one there, where if you look at the amount of resources held in the RIR pools, it's down and to the right. And they've colour-coded. You might find it a little easier on your laptop. APNIC is sitting now at, I need glasses, 1.6/8, which, doing a quick calculation, is approximately 24 million addresses left in their pool. Interestingly, there was a bit of a drain at the end of the year, start of this year, which consumed about 3/4 of a /8, and then it stopped. And APNIC's pools have been sort of stable without a lot of sort of depletion across most of this year. The next one is LACNIC. It's the brown number that LACNIC ran out in the middle of 2014. They do not have a last /8. What they had was a /10 from memory. Do I see Carlos here? He could correct me. There is a /10, and they are slowly getting through that /10. It won't be long. The next one is ARIN, which is the purple line. Now, ARIN actually state they have no addresses left, and that's not true. They actually kept a /10 or 11, wasn't much, I've got it there, for if you were the last chance V6 transition. And that's that residual amount that's just above 0. They actually marked that as reserved, but if you actually look closely, they are doing a small amount of allocations from it. The pale blue is the ripe NCC. They're in their last /8. Interestingly, they had their last /8 when they had more than a /8, and they've been draining it. At the start of 2013, they had around 24 million addresses. They're now down at around, by the look of it, about 14 million addresses left. Dark blue is APNIC. So let's have a look at each of those in detail. The ripe NCC, things have been accelerating a little, but they will have addresses at the current rate of consumption that will take them through around this time in 2021. So they're eking them out, and there's around about 5 years to go for the ripe NCC at that current rate. So at this point, barring some particular change in the way in which they're doing allocations from that block, they have some years to go. LACNIC, they're in this sort of last transitional period, and again, they're doing small allocations from a /10, so it was a quarter of a /8. They're down low. They're down very low. They have approximately 6 months left, maybe 5. It's not going to last much longer. They're nothing. They have no other reserve blocks. ARIN is fascinating. They have this /10 reserved, and over the course of a year, they've used a couple. And I've projected it out, and I think this is pretty impressive. Those 4 million addresses at the current rate of consumption will last until 2350. You'll all be dead, so will I. Weird. Maybe they're hanging on to them too much. I'm like, the idea with addresses is get them out, get them used. That's certainly not happening here. Not much I can say about that projection. I think it's cool. Weird, but cool. APNIC, consumption has varied a lot in that last /8. It's kind of dips and peaks and dips and peaks. In the middle of this year, so across that period, May to July, there was kind of, if you were on a run, and there was a bunch of folk who almost appeared at the registry going, last /8. And that was quite a steep decline at that point, but now it's tapered off again. So these projections are kind of difficult to make, but I have done a polynomial best fit. It's just mathematics in some sense, but it sort of seems to me that this region tends to panic. It happened when we ran out of the normal allocation. We got through 3/8s in a few months. And if you do tend to panic, that red line is going to be pretty accurate. That as we get visibly closer to the end of that last /8, we're going to see a move out the door faster and faster because folk are going to crowd in, because after that there is nothing. There is nothing. So that sort of would give us May 2018, a little bit under 2 years, if that's the case. On the other hand, if we don't panic, it will last until the end of 2019. What's a few months between friends? The end is in sight for even this last /8. It's not going to last forever. So that's a summary of what I've said. So LACNIC, a few months to go, not a lot. APNIC, 2, 3 if you all behave yourselves. I'm going to bet under 2. I'm going to bet 19 months. We'll start a pool out the back here, line up afterwards and we'll all have a bet. APNIC, 2 years to go. I'm really not sure about their any reserved or soft landing policies, but currently they'll reach the end in 2 years. The RIPE NCC, 4.5 years for what it's worth, and Aaron have an astonishing, and they have to be congratulated, 345 years to go. Amazing. Well done, guys. So I just want to have a little bit of a closer look at APNIC, and let's now look at the last /8. We know the last /8, it's 103. So all addresses that start with 103 are in the last /8. We have assigned 8.7 million, as in August something or other. We had available 7.7 million. Interestingly, 182,000 are marked as reserved. Now, I can't tell from public data why. And you might want to ask, the registry services folk, what are those 182,000 addresses doing? I don't know. But they're marked as reserved, neither available nor assigned. They're just reserved. We can look at the policy. Each APNIC member was entitled to a maximum of a /22. So what I should be seeing is a whole bunch of 22s or 23s or 24s inside that block. So just to remind you, we're a little bit over halfway through, 53%, 46% to go, with a small amount, around 1%, being reserved as of August, 2 to 3 years. The registry services folk, and don't ask me why, maybe they just love the idea, started allocating numbers from the start of the block, then at the end. Then they went back to the start, then they went to the end, then they went... They're kind of moving into the middle. I don't know why. Maybe it just sort of suited their sense of order. But the darker the colour, the older the address. So you kind of see that they've been they're now up to 103 I think it's about .70 in the bottom range, and 103.185 or so at the top, and they're coming into each other. Maybe it's just to confuse us, the rest of us. I have no idea. The white is interesting. The white is they're not allocated. They're coming back. So it's kind of not everything that got assigned from the last /8 has stayed assigned. And that's when we start to look at things in a bit further in a few more slides. The policy says up to 1,024, up to a /22. And this is number of allocations by year, and it's pretty clear that in 2016, even up to August, we've allocated more 24s, 23s and 22s than each of the previous years. So in 22s, we've allocated approximately 1,900, 23s, only 200, and 24s, about 400. And that's more than we've done in the past. But you also notice that there are a bunch of allocations that are bigger than that recorded in the data files. bigger than a /22. Here they are. And I was a little bit surprised, but you know, that's the data. There's one party that has 1,280 addresses, funny number, 17 with 1,500. You can read this as well as I can, but certainly there is a number of folk with large addresses. Let me say at the outset, the one at the bottom is me. What we actually did was take the bottom /16 and we're advertising it basically as a long-term measure of hostile traffic in V4. The reason why we did that was that when we first did a quality test on it some years ago, that bottom address was attracting a lot of unwanted traffic. If you deployed it, you'd actually get a constant incoming stream of various bot thingies that were hammering that address harder than any of the others. So we thought we would turn it to research and actually look at the long-term evolution of hostile traffic in V4 post-exhaustion. So the bottom one is basically me, but the rest is not me. Now, I thought it was mergers, acquisitions and transfers. There is a longer discussion, and I'm not sure where you want to have it, on what happens to returns in the last /8. Do they become part of the last /8, or do they get put into the return pool and treated differently? And it's my understanding, and the services folk can leap up and correct me afterwards, but the one thing they told me, which is not obvious from the public data, is that if you return an allocation from the last /8, it goes into the return pool and is then reallocated under a different policy framework than the last /8. I find this confusing because there's no public record of it. I can't tell from the outside why those allocations have happened, but that's what they said. I believe them. I'm a trusting soul. These are the countries that have received allocations from 103/8, and this is the number in terms of allocations, not the amount of addresses. So, of course, what you see are peaks for Australia, for Bangladesh, for China, for Hong Kong, for Indonesia, for India, for Japan, and so on and so forth. What I didn't expect to see was Belize, Canada, that well-known Asian country, France, Great Britain, Iran, the Netherlands, Sweden, the United States, and of course that other Asian country, the British Virgin Islands. Again, this is what's in the data, and there are probably very good reasons why we've done this, and I think it has a lot to do with cloud, and it has a lot to do with the difference between where addresses are being used and where the parent company is. But again, the services folk can explain this, but from the outside, that's what I see. There are around 10 of these kind of allocations from the last /8 where the country registry is way over there somewhere. There are some addresses listed in our transfer log. In the last /8, 2,048 addresses went off to the Netherlands in 2015. 1,024 were transferred to RIPE to an entity in Iran, and 3,000 addresses went to entities that are now registering at them in Arran. Internally within APNIC, there are 195 transfers in this last /8, accounting for a total of 172,000 addresses. So there's a certain amount of movement of these addresses out of this pool, both within APNIC and a smaller amount outwards to other RIRs. You'd think in the last /8, if you got it, you'd advertise it. You'd be wrong. 8,800 folk or addresses were allocated, assigned, but only 5.8 million have been advertised. The other approximately 3 million addresses are not advertised. Don't know why, that's just the data. So around 1/3 of that space is not actually visible in the routing system at this point in time. And it's not a recent phenomenon. If I look at the full map of that /8, the unadvertised, which is blue, is kind of everywhere. I'm not sure why the sort of contiguous blocks, almost a /B is not advertised, a class B, a /16 is not advertised in certain parts of that. I don't know why. But certainly it's not recent, it's not old, it's pretty uniform that some of the addresses we've given out are not advertised and haven't been advertised for some time. So it's a mix and there's no particular pattern there. That consumption model, this is the daily activity of addresses that leave us. So in terms of addresses per day, this is what it looked like. Very sharp, there are a few peaks. The hosties worked overtime sometime in July 2014. They really worked hard. At the end of June 2016, some 70,000 addresses in one day were registered as leaving. So there's a lot of spikes, there's a lot of variation in the workload, but you can make some overall trend models, which I've done, thank you mathematics, and from those trend models, that's where I get back to that projection. So the best fit mathematically across all that data gives us somewhere around mid-2018 to late 2019, assuming you all kind of keep on doing what you're doing. So that's the basis of that 2 to 3 year projection. The other piece of space we still have is that funny sort of space we call IANA recovered. I don't know how many of you folk remember this, but before the RIRs existed, the internet was handing out addresses. And as we created the RIR system, some of those addresses got returned to each of the RIRs because the party that had them kind of appeared in APNIC, and at some point the addresses came back. And rather than treat them as APNIC addresses, those old legacy addresses got sent back to the IANA from all of the 5 RIRs and then got handed back again equally across all the RIRs. So no RIR was sort of advantaged or disadvantaged by this process. So we have received a little under 1/4/8, 4 million addresses, and we've assigned almost all of them. When I prepared this slide in August, there were 39,000 still in the pool. Do we have any left? No, no more left, sorry. The 39,000 are gone as well, tough. I sort of had a look at this and sort of looked at what's going on out of the total pool, 4 million addresses, only 2.2 million are advertised. And the other 1.8 million aren't. So 45% unadvertised. So folk are getting them, but they don't seem to be kind of using them. Transfers, 3,000 got transferred, and the available and reserved numbers are sitting there as well. So what we're seeing there is, I think, probably a pretty uniform pattern out of all of that recovered pool status. Size distribution, predominantly 22s. There are some 21s. I've forgotten what the policy was. Could you get a 22, could you? /22. So some folk have more than one of them. Not sure how they've got it, but they have more than one. Because there's around 10 of them, because it's a log scale, 10 of them with a /21. Again, here's the economies, and now in the green space I've done the IANA recovered, and the purple is the last /8. No great surprises, they basically align. So if you got a lot from the last /8, you probably got a lot from the recovered pool as well, including the United States, including one of the other two of the foreigners, I think it was Canada. You can have a look yourself later. But on the whole, though, it's pretty consistent. Last /8 recovered pool. If you add the two up, advertised and unadvertised, 2/3 are advertised out of the last /8, only 55% from the recovered pool. Now, what I've then done is try and analyse who you are and what holdings do you have. Because in theory, you could hold one of 4 different kinds of addresses. You could be a regular member of APNIC and have some addresses from the APNIC allocations. You could be a relatively old person and have got addresses from a long time ago and transferred them into APNIC through the legacy transfer, what we called ERX. And you could have some of those. You could have addresses from the last /8 or addresses from the recovery pool, or you could have addresses that have transferred in. So you brought them into APNIC. And at the bottom of the line are the columns of totals. 6,000 entities were allocated addresses from APNIC. 900 entities had addresses that were transferred under ERX, the legacy transfer. 9,000 folk have allocations from the last /8, which is 50% more than the folk who have normal allocations. 4,000 folk approximately have addresses from that recovered pool, and the total amount of sort of folk in the registry, I see 14,000 entities. 6,000 have space that was originally allocated before we ran out, and approximately 8,000 are recent entrants who have addresses that were either transferred in or more likely they got from the last /8 or the recovered pools. So the membership profile of APNIC, oddly enough, there are more members with those recent allocations from the smaller pools than there are from all the other historical stuff we did up to the run-out points. So the breakdown of membership is certainly showing a different face to our total pool of holders. There are many, many more holders of very small address plots now than there were in the past. This is the timeline of address consumption, and I must admit one thing just absolutely confuses me. Up until almost this time last year, we were handing out addresses from the recovered pool at a pretty constant rate. We'd get some from IANA, we'd hand them out. We'd get some, we'd hand them out. Then we got some in October, and everyone stopped asking. I don't know why. And we allocated almost none right up until approximately March of this year. So for 6 months, we did almost no allocations from this return pool, nothing. And then either we talked about it at APNIC or someone woke up or whatever you did, and we started allocating, and we're right down to nothing. So that's the kind of time history. There's now nothing left in that pool. I don't know why you all stopped asking across that period, from this time last year until early this year, but you did. Last and not least, how am I going for time? Am I okay? I am.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not rushing. Sorry, I'm going backwards here. Address transfers. This is kind of interesting because I think obviously as the address pools run out, the only place you're going to find more addresses is from each other. So we register in a transfer log all of the transfers. The total transfers registered, there are 1,600. 1,400 are internal within the region. 229 of them came from ARAN. 9 left to go to ARAN, and 9 left to go to the RIPE NCC. So if there is any inter-RIR transfer, it's predominantly with ARAN, but on a scale of 300 to 1,800, less than a sixth of the activity is inter-RIR. That's a large amount of addresses that have moved, 21 million, 21.7 million, about 1.5/8s, of which an entire half a /8, 8 million, came in from ARAN. We gave ARAN, we're very generous, 19,000 back in transfers the other way, and the dealings with the RIPE NCC are of the order of 2/16s, or approximately 115,000 addresses. This is the transfer activity. It's getting bigger, but on average, the number of transfers per month is still somewhere between 30 and 80. It's not a lot of activity. The volume of addresses appears to be rising, that's the lower graph, and sometimes we're getting up to around 5,000 /24s a month, but again, it's not a dramatic increase. I was then interested to understand what you're transferring. And it's kind of interesting that there are 2 peaks, and it's sort of clearly visible in the lower graph, better on your laptop. Old addresses are moving. Stuff that was originally registered between 1988 and 1994, before APNIC started, the old legacy stuff, there was some certain movement of those addresses in the transfer logs. So old addresses are being transferred. But interestingly, the other peak is late or mid 2011. So that block of addresses, the 3/8s that disappeared in the early part of 2011, pretty intense transfer activity in that particular class of addresses, more than anything else that was allocated. And through the rest of APNIC's history up until then, the transfer activity is actually pretty low. So it's either very old or just before exhaustion is the major sort of area where addresses are being transferred, as well as that sort of residual activity in the last /8. I'm trying to look at how long folk held on to their addresses before they transferred them, and the bottom graph is kind of interesting. A lot of addresses were held for 25 years or more, the old legacy stuff. So it first appeared in a transfer after being with the original registrant for 25 years. But the recent stuff is between really 6 and 6 months, 6 years and 6 months. So recent stuff is moving relatively quickly. And that big peak right at the end, which is around 5,000 addresses, were actually 3 months old. So we'd allocated them, and 3 months later that they got moved. That's the data. I don't know why. Countries, who's importing, who's exporting? I've sort of done the graph here of imports and exports. China has imported 3.9 million addresses. They exported 1.5 million, and they transferred 1.8 million within their own economy from a Chinese entity to a Chinese entity. So on the whole, China's a net importer, but a fair amount of address activity in and out of the country. The total amount of activity is around 7 million addresses for China. I've highlighted Hong Kong, very similar, around 2 million addresses in and 1.7 million out. They're different addresses, mostly. They didn't just sort of bounce off Hong Kong and move, although one did. Most of them, they're separate transactions. India, this is interesting, 2 million in, 2.6 million in, and almost none out. So net, it's import rather than export. Korea, where the regulatory environment is much more restrictive about what you can do with addresses in Korea. There's almost no activity at all that we register against Korea. They imported 2 blocks of 1024 and no other activity at all, really. And the other one is Singapore, 3 million in, 2 million out. They're traders. What can I say? They love it. So we've net imported 8 million addresses so far. The largest domestic market is Japan, and Singapore is the largest exporter, and China is the largest importer. We have 14,000 different entities in our registry. So there are 14,000 different holders of resources in our registry. There are only 900 doing transfers. So this is not something you all do. Very few of you actually do it. You're moving a few addresses, but only 900 are actually registered as doing anything here. I'm actually looking and finding that there are 740 distinct transactions. Most of the transactions occur at a /22 level, 22 to 23, although there was one, I think it was a /12. Another one at around a /13, /14, 60 at the old B level, a /16. But in terms of sheer volume, from a 19 through to a 24, the most common that's being moved is a 22. Yeah. In total, you shouldn't get obsessed about transfers, not yet. It doesn't dominate our activity. We have 800 million, closer to 900 million addresses in our registry. A little under a quarter of the space, if you think about it. Of those 900 million, only 21 million have been moved in transfers, so it's 2.5%. And they're only involved 900 entities out of 14,000. So again, it's a relatively low-scale activity, and it's certainly not a massive change in where addresses are. Most of the addresses are still with the original parties that received the allocation. So that was sort of the rundown. I've been able to spend some time, so I hope you now get a clear picture of where we are. If you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to try and answer it. Or the services folk can answer all the questions that I can't, because I only used public data. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, if you have any questions, can come up to the mic. Yes, Guang Liang, you want to make?
Thanks, Jeff, for a very interesting presentation. I very laugh it. Just to clarify a few points, Jeff mentioned it, and why there's some reservations in 103 pool, and also why this allocation was 2N to the middle. That's very interesting, right? And at the beginning, when we start the allocation from the 506A pool, we still have the resource quality insurance program. And we detected some of the range is not that good, and most of them is at the beginning of the pool and some of them at the end of the pool. So we reserved some range in the at the beginning of the pool and at the end of the pool. And our program, it automatically pick up the range from the pool. And they're trying to fill those fragmented gap first before to pick those large range. That's why the allocation is coming from two end to the middle.
So I'm watching a program, not people.
Yeah, it's actually an automatic program to pick
Sure.
the range, not human to take the range. Another point is about the 103 pool. Should we return the 103 space to the philo-CSA pool or to the recover pool? And that probably need a policy to clarify that point. Maybe discuss in tomorrow's policy stick when they discuss the policy proposal 116, and then probably more to clarify that point. Should we return the 103 space to the philo-CSA pool, or should we return all the space, any return to the recover pool? Maybe we can discuss it tomorrow.
Let me clarify this and sort of repeat what you said for benefit of folk who are going to discuss this.
Yeah.
When addresses that were originally allocated under the rules of last/8 get returned to APNIC, they get placed in a different pool, the recovered pool, and then the rules and policies about their subsequent allocation are different. And so they get allocated to new folk. When you look at the registry, you can't tell the difference. They're both marked allocated. They both look like allocations made under the last/8, but some of them have a history that others don't. And if you want to make more policy about the use of the last/8, we've got this problem that some addresses inside that pool numerically are now no longer subject to that policy. And the open question is, folk, what do you want to do about this? Because we need some guidance here.
Yes, actually, I totally agree with you, Jeff. I also prefer to return all 103 space into the philo-CSA pool.
So
to make it more clear.
So your preference is
Yes.
we keep 103 as the last/8 and we don't sort of do the recovered pool stuff. We keep it that way. That's your preference.
Yes, actually.
It would be good to have some guidance from the policy SIG on that. But yeah,
Yes, thanks, Jeff.
thank you.
Question?
Hi, Alan Joran from ICANN. Two questions. The first one, you mentioned that some addresses have not been advertised in BGP, and you also mentioned that some of the last/8 addresses have been transferred. Have you correlated those two things?
No, otherwise I would have done a slide on it. So no, I haven't correlated transfers and advertisements, but it's a good suggestion, thank you. But no, I haven't done that.
And my second question is, you started this by saying this is what we observe from public data.
That's correct.
But there are some anecdotal evidence that are things that are happening that are not in the public data. I'm talking about private contracts, LOAs, and those things are really, really hard to measure, of course, because they are not public data. But is there a way that we could infer from other things the relative proportion of those private contracts to what is actually recorded as transfers? In other words, are transfers the tip of the iceberg of the activity, or are those private contracts only in the noise?
You know, that is a tough question. I am a firm believer in evidence-based policy, and it's really good to, if you will, create community guidelines and policies based on evidence you can touch and feel. And I think once we start going away from that and making policies based on fear and suspicion or, you know, an inkling, it gets difficult. The problem with what you're saying is we have heard there is a certain amount of letters of authority, leasing, all kinds of arrangements that aren't reflected in a registry. And it is extremely difficult to nail that down and say, well, it's this much and it's happening here, because quite frankly, it's not recorded, and because I'm not an ISP and most of us aren't, you know, on the APNIC side, I can't measure it. I can't see it. So you're right, there is a certain amount of that activity, but beyond saying a certain amount, I can't tell you what that means quantitatively. I'd be interested to understand if there are ways we could get a better handle on it, but I would be suspicious of presenting guesses to you masquerading as data. I don't want to be in the point of sort of giving you rubbery feelings and saying, well, this is real data, because that would be a bad thing too.
I understand. The flip side of it is when you say there's a relatively small number of transfers that is happening compared to the overall volume. Let me repeat that. When you say that there is a small proportion of transfer compared to the overall volume of addresses recorded in the database, that may or may not be a complete statement.
True. This is qualified by the data available to me that I know and understand, the public data. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Because of time constraint, we'll just have one last question. Is that all right? Or we can leave the question at the very end.
Okay.
Yeah, Ajay Kumar from IRIN. So I want to know from APNIC that the return pool of 103. So are we giving that pool is separated? That is considered as a return pool, or it is we are not giving to anyone? It will be in last 103 only. So
You're asking the wrong person. There
yeah,
are
just from service manager. So I understand the preference, but what is being done now?
I try to expand that. Like 103 pool was defined as a 503 pool in the policy and the first session. So at the beginning, we did return those 103 space to the 503 pool, 103 pool. But later on, we found out this one sentence that say, return space should put into the recover pool. And then we talked that it in APNIC41 in Auckland, report that. And then after that, we return a small amount of 503 of 103 space to the recover pool after that Auckland meeting. Actually, we reported in the Auckland meeting. And now I feel if we have another policy proposal, 116, they also allow to stop some transfer from the 503 pool. If we don't have a clear definition of the range of 503, it's very hard to implement and also hard for the public people to watch what is going on.
So we used to do it one way. Now we're doing it another way. We kind of feel we've got a problem the other way, and there's a strong preference from the Secretariat, from the services folk to say we'd like to go back to doing what we did originally. Okay?
Thank you.
So maybe we can talk about it tomorrow in the policy discussion.
Okay.
I think it's the best place to talk tomorrow.
All right. All right. Thanks, Guang Liang. So let's continue the discussion
Okay,
tomorrow in policy. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, next I would like to invite Vivek to share with you on our observation and trends for new member application. Vivek, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vivek, and I manage the member services team at APNIC. The member service team is the first point of contact for any support that our members need. So we process new membership applications, resource transfers, WHOIS updates, and so on. Today, I would like to share with you some trends we have observed in new membership applications, where some organizations submit multiple applications to get more IPv4 address because they can't get it under their existing accounts. I will also share some examples of how we have processed these suspicious cases and what kind of challenges we face in processing these cases. Okay, we know that the IPv4 address pool is almost exhausted, and as a result of this exhaustion, all RIRs, apart from APNIC at this stage, have implemented various policies to manage the distribution of the remaining address space. So in our region, we allow 1/22 to each member from the last /8, and then the additional /22 from the recovered pool, which has a wait list. RIPE have a similar policy of 1/22, and they don't have any recovered pool. LACNIC's policy is slightly more lenient. They allow /22 to their members every 6 months. ARIN exhausted their IPv4 pool, and APNIC are still discussing their final /8 policy. Now, because we have all these policy restrictions on getting more IPs, and at the same time there are strong demands from members for more IPs, organizations are finding different ways to fulfill those needs. Some organizations go to brokers to buy IPs, some deploy NATs to extend their IPv4s, and then some members try to submit multiple applications to see if they can get additional IPv4s through that way. Now, our final /8 pool is depleting fast. We have less than half of the /8 left in our last /8. And due to this rapid depletion, we are noticing more and more organizations submitting suspicious applications to try and get the last bits of IPv4 before it is exhausted. Now, the spirit behind APNIC's last /8 policy was to conserve this block so that any organization in the future that needed IPs can still get some small block from the registry to connect and then migrate to IPv6. But with the trends we are seeing in this membership application, we expect this pool will run out very soon, as Jeff presented, probably in a couple of years from now. Okay, in this graph, you can see some trends we have observed in applications from organizations that are based out of this region. APNIC membership is open to all organizations, but if the organization is a registered legal entity outside this region, they also need to demonstrate that they have physical network infrastructure or a point of presence in the APNIC region, and they need IPs for that infrastructure. So here we can see until 2010, we were getting about 15 to 20 applications from outside this region. This jumped to double to 40 new applications in 2011, and then again doubled to 80 applications last year in 2015. 2015 also happens to be the time when ARIN exhausted the last /8, all the IPv4s, and RIPE also put a temporary block on their members from opening multiple LRIRs to get additional /22s. So I suspect some of these spikes we're seeing in the application may have been caused due to those incidents. So in the next few slides, I will show you some examples of how we have processed suspicious applications and how we rejected them. Okay, so first we have some applications from an ISP that was operating in the ARIN region. So we got this application earlier this year. They provided their legal documentations, such as their trade license, passports, and then they provided technical justification for the IPs. They showed their network plans, equipments, and their plans to open data centers in Australia. So when this was processed, the account was opened, we gave them the IP addresses. A couple of months later, we received a fraudulent activity report from a member from the community. They advised this organization has given false information and that they don't have any network infrastructure outside the ARIN region. They also showed us some looking glass results to show how their AS is connected to the internet and how that upstream AS also does not have any network presence outside the ARIN region. So we took this information, got back to a member, and asked them if there has been any changes in their network plans. Initially, the member responded very promptly. They said they are still doing some testing and some configuration. After that, they said they are now changing some plans to not build their own data centers, but to co-locate them with different data centers in Australia. So at this stage, we asked them some additional questions to show what changes have happened to the network plans, as well as some service agreements they have with these data centers. And at this stage, the members stopped responding. We sent multiple follow-ups with no responses, so we ended up reclaiming those IPs last month. another one, we had 8 applications from a hosting provider based in the Ripe region. So this was 8 separate applications from different legal entities, but the same individual submitted the application. He claimed to be the owner for all these companies. They were all requesting for the maximum /21 for their network presence in AP region. On doing some checks, we found that all these organizations were already existing members of RIPE, so they had LIR accounts with RIPE. So we had suspicions if they had genuine needs for IPs in the APNIC region. So during evaluation, we asked them additional questions, such as shipping documents to show if they have moved the infrastructure to this region. We asked them to provide contracts with data centers and service providers in this region, and most of them simply ignored or could not answer those questions. Some of them also advised it is confidential, they can't show it, so we gave them the option to basically hide out anything confidential and give the document, but they were not willing to do that. So we were not satisfied that these people have network presence here, and we rejected these applications. Okay, and just one more example. So this is some franchising model applications we got from organizations in our region. So in March, we received this application from an ISP, and on doing some basic checks, we found out there were existing members with IPs from the final /8, so we simply rejected that application. A couple of weeks later, we received 10 new applications from different organizations. All of them were using the same email domain, which was belonging to the ISP we rejected. All of them also asked to update their billing details to point to the ISP because they would pay their invoice. After doing some checks, we noticed all these 10 organizations had different trade licenses. Some of them were operating as travel agents, hardware vendors, and so on, which we found a bit suspicious. So here we first called the ISP and asked them if they're aware of these organizations. And they informed that these are their customers, they operate in a franchising model, and they resell the internet to the customers. They have some 100 such franchisee customers, and we can expect applications from all of them. So we had a suspicion, so we asked these 10 organizations to provide extra information to show who owns the network infrastructure. We also asked them if they had any intentions to transfer. Some of them said no, but the others could not give a clear answer. They said maybe not now, but in the future, which we thought was very odd. Why would anyone who's just received IPs for a new business have any intentions to transfer? They should really be looking for more IPs. So we continued asking more questions. We asked them for ISP license because the trade license say they conduct different businesses. And eventually, some of these members admitted they don't need these IPs. They're actually for their ISP, and because they can't get more, they have been suggested to submit these applications. So, of course, we rejected those applications. So these are just some examples of suspicious applications we get. We get heaps of them every day. In some more severe cases, there are organizations who have made up false websites to pretend to be a different company and apply. So the complexity of these applications keep getting more complex every day. So what are some of the challenges we are facing when processing these applications? Well, we apply a due diligence checklist for all new applications. So every time an organization applies, we check that they are a registered legal entity. The person who's applying is an authorized contact for that organization. We check their phone numbers are working. We ask them for network plans to make sure they meet the policy criteria. And then we also check what equipments they have so we are satisfied that they can consume the IPs they are applying for. Now, because we are getting more and more suspicious applications, we need to now do a lot more due diligence checks. So we need to check company websites to see what service they provide and if it's consistent with what they're applying. Sometimes we've gone one step further and checked when that company was registered, who registered that domain, to see if there's something suspicious there. We ask them for ISP or transit provider license if they claim to provide that service and they operate in economies where these licenses are required. We also ask for upstream contracts, so if they say they're connected with IX's contracts they have with IX to show they're actually connected. And then we also ask for invoices that show that those equipments are actually on their name and not someone else. If they're from out of the region, we also ask them for some proof that they have shipped all these equipments to use in the APNIC region. So because we're getting more and more of these suspicious applications, they're getting more complex, it is taking us a lot of more additional resources in terms of man-hours to process these new applications, sometimes a couple of weeks per application. Now, some aspects of the evaluation we do are also based on trust, because we can't physically go and meet every new organization, see what they have. So when we ask for questions, we ask for documents, we need to trust what they have given us is accurate. At times we don't know if it is, till someone from the community dobs them in to show they have given something false, like the application from the ARIN region. And lastly, we are seeing more and more transfers from the final /8 block. We have some presentations that Tuan will do tomorrow to show some stats on these transfers. Now, because the current policies don't have any restrictions on the transfers from final /8, some organizations see this as an opportunity to apply for multiple applications and then transfer those IPs around. So perhaps if there was a policy which did not which restricted these transfer, I suspect we will get a lot less of these suspicious applications. So tomorrow there is a discussion on the final /8 transfer policy, and I hope this has given you some insights to the trends we have observed with suspicious applications, and it helps you with the discussion of that transfer policy. That is all I have.
Thank you, Vivek. Do we have any question for Vivek? I just want to add on a comment saying that what Vivek has shown in his presentation are by no means the standard question we ask for every resource request. We would only take an extra step and ask for more information and question when we actually feel that request as suspicious. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you, Vivek. Right now, I'd like to invite Tom Harrison, our software manager, to talk to you about historical WHOIS services. Tom?
Thanks, George. My name is Tom Harrison. I work in the software team at APNIC, and today I'll be talking about WHOWAS, which is a historical WHOIS service. So it's a service for accessing the details of an internet resource or resource range over a period of time, including associated objects like maintainers and admin and technical contacts. It's not actually something that software as such is working on. It's a product of APNIC Labs, so that's Byron Ellicott and George Michelson. There are two main use cases for this sort of service. The first one is for transfer recipients to see the organisations that have used the ranges that they are potentially receiving in the past, to see what those organisations were up to, or perhaps if they're engaged in illicit purposes or things like that, which might affect that transfer recipient's decision to proceed with the transfer. Apart from that, there's also the case during a dispute. There might be one of the parties changing contact details or authorization details. That's not necessarily obvious from WHOIS as it stands today, whereas if historical data can be seen, it's more obvious that somebody is acting with bad faith. But apart from that, there could be other use cases that aren't immediately apparent. Making this data public means that researchers who have ideas can play around and try things out. It's implemented as a separate service that exposes an RDAP-like API. It would make sense at the best of times to implement this as an API, but particularly here because of the need to get information from other registries or to redirect to other registries, because with inter-RAR transfers, there's no registry that can speak to a resource over all time. For example, if APNIC receives a transfer from ARIN, then APNIC can only return details for the time for which APNIC had the resource. There's a prototype front-end user interface at whowas.ideas.apnic.net, It's publicly accessible if you guys want to have a look. It's just for demonstration though, so it's just a prototype and the final version will look quite different. But it does demonstrate the sorts of things that can be done with this API. This is a screenshot. It's kind of difficult to read, but the main parts are the search input at the top, where the IP address or range can be entered. And then on the left-hand side, there's an object selection pane. So each of the objects that cover that range can be clicked. And then on the right-hand side are the objects themselves, plus the linked maintainers and contacts. If you open the page in a browser, you can see that you can scroll right to see the object as it stood at various points in time. It has a sort of diff format for showing the changes to the objects as well. Not immediately apparent here because the colors are a bit funny. This is a screenshot of the raw JSON being the RDAP-like part of this. It's, again, easier to see if you open the prototype in a browser and then use developer tools or something like that to see the JSON. The main differences between normal RDAP and this are that the top level element here is a history object, and then inside the history object are the copies of the object as it stood at various points in time under a versions key. So each version of the object has the period of time for which it was applicable, as well as the raw whois data at that point in time. Future work in this space will be around formalizing the documentation and possibly registering an RDAP extension. This is a fairly low-cost way of getting some feedback and possibly fostering some adoption. There aren't any concrete plans at the moment with respect to the other registries, but there's a chance that they will also implement this, in which case it will be possible to link to their information for the periods of time for which they are authoritative. Apart from that, there will be more work done on the user interface to make it more user-friendly. The code is at GitHub, at the link on this slide. If you have any problems with the code, you can raise an issue on GitHub, or you can contact Byron or George directly at the email addresses that are also on this slide. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I believe Tom has another colleague, Gary, here, so if anyone is interested in what our software engineering team is involved, feel free to talk to them after the session during your meeting here. Next, it's my turn, and I just want to take the next 5 minutes to quickly talk about providing feedback for APNIC services. We know some of you here have interacted with APNIC in the past, and that might be in the form of talking to a staff, having your question answered, or could be using APNIC's website, an online form. You could have attended the training sessions, a workshop, or we could be attending an outreach event that organized by APNIC. And we really see these type of interactions are really important, and it's part of our service to our member and the community. Not only we want to make sure the services that's been given to you or used by you is needed, it's appropriate, it's good. We also want to make sure that quality is the most satisfactory to you all who are using these services. So I want to just spend 5 minutes to talk to you about the services roadmap that we have started publishing since 2014. APNIC services roadmap really is information about upcoming service development plan that we would like to share with you with the objective of getting feedback from you to tell us whether this is what you need, whether you need more or less, and so on. So it's an opportunity for you to feedback to APNIC. We believe it's very important for you who use the service to be able to share the feedback with us. And this would also be able to help you to track the status and development of the program on any of the project of the service development that you are interested in. So I'd like you to take note of this URL where we publish our services roadmap, /services-roadmap. And whenever you are curious or interested to find out something, please do feel free to visit this web page. It has all the services roadmap that we published since 2014, and you'll be able to see more details on the progress, and even make and submit your feedback through the page, and let us know what you think. So we presented in the last APNIC meeting about the roadmap for 2016, and I just again want to take this opportunity to quickly show you the highlights of the area of focus. So we have put our focus in improving the resource certification service, membership support, resource management, who is up there management, and training and technical support, which you heard from Nurul, the first speaker this afternoon. The specific project that we did under this area of focus are improvement to My APNIC feature, which includes ROA and route management, merger and acquisition form, which improves the transfer services. And also we heard from our My APNIC survey previously that people do really want to have a much better user experience when they manage the reverse delegation. So we have implemented the IPv4 and V6 view all in one page. We also got rid of the paper form, corporate contact appointment, so everything can be done online. So these are just a range of projects that been implemented throughout this year, and in fact, most of these are already been implemented. Something that we also recently completed is a new statistics web page, which is quite a pretty page. You could see, you could get data on resource delegation and information on specific resource delegation presented to you with the various different charts and different, even the distribution to sub-region. So I would encourage you to visit this page and take a look and share your thoughts and feedback with us. Another thing I'd like to highlight is the ROA, route management, which I mentioned earlier. It's in 2016 roadmap. So this is something new that we have delivered. And really the advantage is that people will be able to manage route in one page and create their route and ROA at the same time easily, and also being able to create route with any authorized AS number they wish. And I would also encourage for those of you who either you have or have not used this, spend a few minutes with Vivek's team. Vivek, and we have Pubudu at the services lounge, so they will be able to show you and give you a demo on this feature that's been recently implemented. And looking ahead, I'd like to show you some area of focus as well for 2017, which is what coming up for next year. And these are also similar focus as 2016, which we would like to continue to improve WHOIS user experience, which would include making query and update and reporting of invalid contact much better experience for the people who use WHOIS. We are also considering improving the membership management, which would primarily be covering reactivation of membership accounts, public API for data updates. So this information will soon be available on the services roadmap for you. Nothing is set in stone, but these would be the area we're interested to hear the feedback from you. If you do have any suggestion and preference, again, I strongly encourage you, I invite you to take note of this page and give your feedback from here. And finally, I'd like to say that all this improvement that we put out, we implement can't just be delivered by myself or just my team or a couple of people or group of people. It's actually made possible with the whole team, with the APNIC staff. Finally, these are how you could give feedback to us through various different ways. You could talk to us face to face. If you feel like you just want to put something down, you can write to us to feedback@apnic.net or contact through help desk. You could chat to us online, call us via the Skype. You could also give your feedback directly from services roadmap and take part in survey. We know we have a regular 2 years member survey, but we also do send out invite after the service interaction with help desk and any other interaction with the services team. So if you do get those email invitation, I encourage you to share with us your thought on APNIC services. So that's it for my picture, for my talk, and I want to share the picture with you that this is the whole group that we took out when we at the staff development outreach picture, and it's the whole APNIC team here. And like I said, it's our credo to deliver excellence in service and value to APNIC member. And again, I invite and encourage you to provide feedback for APNIC services. That's it for my talk. And any question for me? No? Good. Thank you.
I have a question for Jeff Houston.
Okay, yes, sorry, there are many questions, right?
Yeah. So basically my question is, I look at Jeff, your own website, which is telling that 80% of all allocated address in APNIC region is advertised, which means 20% is not. And in terms of 800, almost 900 million, that's by simple calculation, that's almost 200 million addresses wasn't advertised, which means they aren't in use at this moment. Although we see a relatively small amount of transfer percentage compared to the total amount of IP addresses, but there are still large amount of IP addresses wasn't in use in the date of exhaustion. So would that mean that there's still large potential for there's older addresses still be able to be digging into and be able to reuse for much longer than we originally thought? That's the first question. The second question was compared to what Alan's comment about iceberg. When an organization making an assignment as RIR to end user, they supposedly to make an assignment to their end user, and they should be registered them in the WHOIS database, in which such iceberg should be, visible in the public WHOIS database, because who actually using them should be available in that database. So I think there is a way maybe to know how many LOA has been issued for that sense. And transfer is a change of rights of use from IR perspective. But if you just want to use the address, you don't really need to have a transfer. You can simply assign to your customer, isn't it? So that's basically my questions.
So the first and the last questions I can answer. The middle one, I wouldn't have a clue. That's a who is kind of question. The first question. When you say a snapshot today says that 20% of the addresses in APNIC's registry are not being advertised, that does not say they were never advertised. They may have been. I haven't given you that data. And secondly, it doesn't tell you where they came from. As you're well aware, the original policies of address allocations done by the Internet back in the late 80s and early 90s had absolutely no constraint whatsoever. And so you just asked for addresses and you got them. Now, they might be used in private contexts, in VPNs, in industrial automation. They're not necessarily on the Internet. And it was only really when the RIRs started creating, if you will, a culture of conservative allocation did we tie address allocation to use and justified need more tightly. Now, I think almost 1/2 of the address space was allocated before the RAR system. The old Bs had a huge amount of space. And so there's an awful lot of space, even in APNIC's books, that is a different policy. And you can't say it's not being used. What you can say is, I can't see it. They're different statements.
So you are seeing about 20% of addresses, or maybe not all of them, but large amount of them actually using some private internet.
Oh, look, I don't know, and you don't know. You can't see them today, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But inferring what the real story is goes beyond where data is. Your last question disappeared off the screen, didn't it?
No, assignment. You can make an assignment. So the iceberg should
okay,
be...
no. Okay, so I can lend you an address. You can be a customer, you can do what you want, and that's kind of a private arrangement. But if I wish to use an address and enjoy the full rights of that, to be able to route it, to be able to put stuff in the routing registries, to have a rower, etc., and use it... There's a cat loose, or is it a mouse? And use it as if it was mine, then you can't do that as a customer of someone else. If you wish to be, if you will, a full holder of addresses and have a rower, have this, have that, you need to be recognised within a registry framework, and you are then the associated controller of that address. You can't do that other than promoting yourself into the registry going, I'm the current holder. So yes, there are many ways of obtaining an address, but typically they have, like a lease versus ownership, conditions and constraints. You don't get the full and, if you will, unlimited use of that address. It's constrained. Now, depending on your need, depending on what you want, some folk are okay as being customers, but other folk are not. They might say, it's my business, it's my livelihood, I need those addresses because, you know, that's my core asset of my business. In which case, being a customer of someone else is perhaps a less than satisfactory answer. So that's why folks see the registry as being a common value and a common utility to the entire industry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. While I still have everyone here, and I just talk about getting feedback from you for APNIC services, so I think we can still spend another 2-3 minutes. I would like to invite people who want to come to the mic and share what you think about how we went with this session and what you like to hear in the future session, or how we can improve this session. Anything? Anyone would like to come up to the mic and share the feedback? No? You're all shy. AJ, I assume you would like to make a...
Ajay from IRIN. I really appreciate the service team and APNIC team for continuous improving the services. I look forward for more services enhancement. Whenever as a IRIN we have given some feedback, I am happy to share with the community that we received the response from APNIC and that has been implemented. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that feedback. Thank you. Anyone else? Critic or any? Yes, please come up. If you just like to share your name and where you're from, but I know you're certainly from Sri Lanka.
I'm Subhashini, I'm from Sri Lanka and I'm a fellow here. Actually, I'm really happy about attending this conference and what are the things we learned and what are the things to deliver and scheduled by APNIC. Although they are very much focusing on whatever the emerging technologies, just like IPv6 deploying and other security risks and all the things. So I would like to request APNIC team that you're just that concentrate on the industrial people, but I would like to ask you to concentrate about that future also, that just like our students and universities, if you can arrange some workshops, it will be better, that they are the future, and whatever we are talking about equipment development and infrastructure and developments, and they will be the people handling in the future. So I think it will be grateful if you can look at into that angle also. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you very much for sharing your feedback. We'll certainly have it on our future reference, and we'll be in touch again. Thank you. Would you please come up to the mic?
Thank you very much once again. Khalil Azizi from Afghanistan. Although I have shared my ideas mostly when I'm interacting personally with the APNIC members or those who are here as a staff.
Yes.
The thing we need more is, yes, we have some countries where, of course, APNIC cannot go, and they are having some bad impression of those places. So e-learning is an option, and I think that will be so much effective. Plus, I appreciate this initiative from the APNIC that they have started this program of youth, that they've just called for the conference. The youth are now joining, and this must go on. We have to give more opportunities to students because if we invest on them, they are future assets and they can learn more. They are in the field of learning, and that's called academic. So that will be more benefited for them as well. Beside them, we are joining here, so that's in a good kind of combination that the APNIC staff with experience, we who are working practically as experience, we are sharing with these youth. So this program is an excellent example, and this must go on, and we need to appreciate it more and encourage it more. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your feedback and comment. I know we do have plan for our online learning, e-learning. I'm not sure whether Nurul still here would like to say something about that. No? Yep. Or Duncan, would you like to share something about our online?
Thanks, George. Yes, I think next year the community will see that APNIC has invested considerable resources in developing an online academy, learning academy. The first couple of courses will appear early next year. We're working on them right now. And they will expand what you've seen online already from the e-learning and YouTube channels that I think many of you have tapped into already, and include, for example, simple tests and procedures that allow you to work through different syllabuses. So that's coming, that'll be coming next year.
Thank you, Duncan. Any more feedback? All right, otherwise, like I said, please do not feel shy. Talk to us, or you can email to us, feedback@apnic.net, or anytime, contact our help desk staff. Thank you very much for coming to this session. Thank you.